There was a time when I was everywhere. Not in the way a man should be. Not in the way that leaves footprints or worn paths behind him. But in the way the light flickers across too many windows at once. Always on, always moving, always proving that I was there. I spoke often. Too often. As if silence was something that might swallow me whole if I gave it a chance. And people watched. Or at least, I told myself they did. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from being seen without ever being known. It builds slowly, like sediment. Layer after layer of moments you thought mattered. Until one day you realize you can't remember which parts of you were real and which parts were just for them. I didn't announce my departure. There was no closing statement, no final broadcast, no explanation tied up neatly in a bow so that everyone could feel comfortable about my absence. I simply stopped. And for a while, nothing happened. No great collapse, no sudden unraveling of the world without me in it, no desperate knocking at the door asking where I had gone. The noise continued on without me, perfectly fine. That was the first lesson. You are not as necessary as you think you are. And strangely, that realization doesn't wound you. It frees you. Because if the world can continue on without your constant presence, then you are finally allowed to leave it, without guilt. I remember the first walk I took after I decided not to come back. It was along the river, just as the light was beginning to soften in the evening. The kind of light that doesn't demand anything from you. It just exists, and lets you exist with it. No one knew who I was out there. No one expected anything from me. I wasn't a voice. I wasn't a persona. I wasn't something to be consumed. I was just a man walking. And it felt unfamiliar at first, like wearing clothes that belonged to someone quieter than I used to be. But the longer I stayed out there, the more something in me began to settle. Thoughts that used to race for attention started to fall into line, then into silence. I sat on a bench with a book I had no intention of finishing. Not because I couldn't, but because for the first time in a long time I didn't feel the need to complete something just to prove that I could. I watched people pass, couples speaking in low voices, students drifting between buildings with nowhere urgent to be, a man laughing with someone beside him, a real laugh, the kind that doesn't need to be recorded to feel valid. And I realized how long it had been since I had experienced anything that didn't have an invisible audience attached to it. That was the second lesson. Most of life loses its shape the moment you perform it. There's a quiet violence into turning every moment into something shareable, something consumable, something that needs to be captured before it can be felt. You begin to live ahead of yourself, narrating instead of experiencing, documenting instead of remembering, and it wears you down. Not all at once, but steadily. Like a drip you stop noticing until the entire room is flooded. When I stepped away from it, truly stepped away, something unexpected happened. My mind slowed. Not in a dull, lifeless way, but in a way that felt natural, like a river returning to its original course after being forced through too many channels. The constant comparison faded. The need to respond disappeared. The pressure to remain relevant dissolved into something that was almost laughable. And in that space, creativity returned. Not the frantic, restless kind that demands to be seen, but a quieter thing. Something patient. Something that didn't care if anyone else ever understood it. I began to notice details again. The way the wind moves through the trees without asking permission. The rhythm of footsteps on old sidewalks. The particular stillness that settles over a place when no one is trying to turn it into something else. I spoke less. But when I did, it came from somewhere deeper than before. Not from the surface where everything is polished and prepared, but from a place that had been left untouched for a very long time. That year, the one where I disappeared, people might call it isolation. They might call it withdrawal. Some might even say I lost something, but they'd be wrong. That was the year I stopped dividing myself into pieces small enough for everyone else to hold. That was the year I let the version of me that needed to be seen die. And in its place, something quieter took root. Something that didn't need permission to exist. That's when this began. Not as a return, but as something entirely different. The stories you hear now, the places I walk, the silence I leave between words, this isn't a continuation of what came before. This is what happens after. After the noise, after the performance, after the need to be anywhere other than where you are. There's a saying that life is easier to deal with when you are dead. And maybe it's right. Not because death takes you away from life, but because it takes life away from everything that was never really living to begin with. The expectations, the constant exposure, the quiet pressure to remain visible at all times. Let that version of you go. Let it fall away without ceremony. Take the walk without telling anyone you're leaving. Sit under the tree without reaching for your phone. Read a page slowly enough so that it doesn't feel like a task. Speak to someone without thinking about how it might sound later. Disappearing isn't failure. It's a skill. And the ones that learn it, the ones that can step out of the light without fear, they are the ones who come back with something real. Or sometimes, they don't come back at all. And that might be the most honest life a person can live. There are places in this city that don't speak unless you've learned how to be quiet. Old houses that remember more than they show. Windows that have watched lives unfold and unravel without ever once needing to explain themselves. I didn't find them by accident. When you step out of the noise long enough, when you let yourself become a ghost among the living, certain things begin to notice you. And sometimes, they answer. There's one house in particular. It sits where it always has, untouched in the ways that matter, carrying a name most people pass by without ever truly hearing. But I've heard it. More than once. And lately, it seems, I'm not the only one paying attention. Because word travels in places like this. Not loudly, not openly, but just enough. Enough for certain people to start asking questions about the man who disappeared and came back knowing things he shouldn't. I suppose it was only a matter of time before one of those doors opened. And this time, I think I'm going to step through it.